I know this isn't a mountain, but we're in the snow and it snows so rarely in where I live, so, oh, sorry about the siren. This is a lot better than outside. You never truly appreciate the magnetism of nature until you see it up close. And nothing is as majestic up close as a big ass, sizable mountain. Mountains have some of the most remarkable histories known to humanity. They have been towering over Earth since humans were born onto it, so naturally, we've sought to climb them. Climbing mountains has been ingrained in human history since the earliest that we could record it. Between Moses going up to the mountain to receive the Ten Commandments, to the 8 pillars of the sky in Chinese myth, between Sumer, Olympus, and the Native Americans, the endless relationship between the human story and mountains is so far-reaching I couldn't even record it in one video. These stories have echoed through the ages and have inspired the real-life conquest of these gigantic earth monuments. El Capitan, Kilimanjaro, and Everest are just but a few of these examples that have generated some of the most inspiring stories of the past century. But why are these stories so captivating? Well, they're pretty simple. Get to the summit. Travel from point A to point B. The goal is singular, but the means to achieve it are numerous. There can be any number of diversions, physical and bodily harm, or reflections on the human condition on the way up to the summit. But at the end of the day, the character either makes it to the top and achieves their goal, or falls short of it. And scaling a mountain is the closest thing that we can feel to touching heaven. Just the same way that we feel very euphoric whenever we complete a goal of ours that we've been working on for weeks or months or even years. I can't tell how many times that I've worked on a project or worked on a goal of mine for a long time, and I felt like I've summited a mountain at the end of it. However, much like the goals that we share with mountaineers, the journey up a mountain reveals the underlying traits of the universe. They show much about the environment that we must conquer as all signs of life begin to slip away the higher and higher that you climb. They reveal the innermost desires, feelings, and hatreds of oneself as you make the journey upwards with almost no one else to rely on but your own psyche and instincts. But often, most of all, it reveals humankind's battle with nature, man's convergence with it, that it's been undertaking ever since humankind opened its eyes, as we have clambered and climbed our way to the planet's apex. You're as close as you can be to going through the journey with the character themselves. You're just like a companion on their shoulder, watching them do this incredible thing. Games can reveal the themes of humankind's conquest of the natural world almost better than anything else. But most importantly, they reveal so much about the journey will beat you down in more ways than one. In Celeste, you play as Madeline, who is trying to climb up Celeste Mountain for what seems like no other reason than that she just really wants to do it. Within the first minute, the world begins to push back against you. As Madeline sprints across the bridge to begin her journey, it dramatically collapses behind her, causing her to nearly miss the other side until a bird lets you know that you can use this fun little dash move. Celeste is an incredibly focused title, permeating through almost every aspect of gameplay. Each level of this platformer is built upon the only 3 actions that can move Madeline around the world: jumping, dashing, and climbing. But each region of this mountain that the protagonist needs to climb builds upon these mechanics in creative ways. For example, the traffic light blocks that you have to time your jumps to, the feathers that let you fly around every single part of the level, the bubbles that propel you in one direction for what seems like an eternity. And each part of the movement is satisfying because it feels like every single one of your choices has some weight to it. When you jump and dash one way, you can flip the joystick the other direction to cancel some of your momentum. Conversely, with items like the traffic light blocks, you can time your jumps to launch yourself across massive stretches of the mountain. It's in the initial restraint with each of these mechanics, which lead into the gradual expansion of the movement options, that makes Celeste such a good platformer. But respectfully, this game is fucking hard. It feels like ages pass you by as you repeatedly fling yourself in certain sections of a level, getting tripped up constantly by a certain obstacle or enemy. And the game encourages this monotony, with extremely fast load times and the aforementioned satisfying movement. You almost want to plunge yourself into the void farther and farther just so you can see what's at the end of the line. which makes it all the more familiar of a problem when you begin to hear Madeline's plight. The moment she takes her first step up Celeste Mountain, you know that something is off with Madeline. She's got few words for the characters that even try to talk to her, and she's doubtful of herself to even scale this first section of the game in the first place. Then you come face to face with part of you? Madeline looks in a mirror and sees a seemingly dark version of her. Then all goes silent, the mirror dramatically shatters, the doppelganger emerges, and then vanishes as quickly as she appears. Later, you get face to face with her again, saying that she's part of you, simply a concerned observer, and warns you of the dangers of climbing this mountain. But if you're paying attention, the player can clearly see that this imposter is doing nothing but sowing seeds of doubt within Madeline's mind. And then she begins chasing you around the stages of the level. It's this inner battle with this part of her that follows Madeline throughout the entire game. It shows up in her relationship with the other characters, whether benevolent or evil. Her dark side essentially causes the ghostly owner of a hotel up on the mountaintop to turn against her, despite Madeline wishing nothing but the best for him. When she tries to save her friend Theo, who's been sidelined on the journey, the doppelganger continues to lambaste her with negative thoughts, saying she never should have climbed the mountain in the first place. Eventually, she tries to cast this part of her off completely, causing a complete and utter meltdown by her other half, flinging them both off the side of the mountain. Despite her pitfalls, Madeline thinks that she's going about this in the right way. She's deliberately ignoring these thoughts, trying to escape from a part of herself that never wanted to climb the mountain in the first place, the so-called voice of reason. Yet every time that she tries to escape or cast off her darkest thoughts and instincts, they only come back stronger. She has this almost unending want to power through her emotions and physical obstacles no matter how many times she dies, just because she can. She wants freedom from her circumstances, but more importantly, freedom from herself. Alex Honnold's story is one of the most famous in the climbing world. Free Solo was a phenomenon in 2018, detailing the most impressive feat of humankind's desire to climb mountains by climbing a 3,000 plus foot cliff without any semblance of gear. Every single one of your relatives that you probably speak about 2 sentences to at Thanksgiving would have recommended this movie to you, so I'm not going to try to tell the story again. But I wanted to highlight just how impressive the climbing mechanics that he does thousands of feet up in the air. He grabs onto razor-thin ledges with just a couple of fingers. He wedges his feet into cracks to probably get just a couple extra feet of distance. And he's doing all of this while having absolutely no gear and the possibility of death right around the corner. It shows an incredible amount of body control and awareness. Fun fact, it was quite literally impossible to, while recording this voiceover, to not physically cringe at the sheer amount that he is off the ground without any type of any fucking gear. I can't do it. Yet there's one key aspect that makes Alex's story especially compelling. While he quickly brushes off anything supporting this fact, Alex doesn't seem to experience fear. Alex scales sheer cliffs 1,000 times the size of any normal climbing gym without feeling a bit of panic. It's later confirmed that his amygdala, the part of your brain that controls your fear mechanisms, doesn't respond the same way that the typical person's does. And one aspect of the pre-scan interview shown in the 2018 documentary reveals a lot of where this comes from. He's asked if he is depressed, and then the film abruptly cuts. I want to be extremely clear that I am not making any assumptions of Alex Honnold's mental health. He has said in previous media appearances that he gravitates towards being a depressed person.
Do you ever get depressed, or have you ever been depressed?
Yeah. No, I think I kind of gravitate towards being a somewhat depressed person. I don't know. Or, I don't know, actually.
It's understandable. His father died when he was 19, in part causing him to drop out of college after just one semester, and then go pursue climbing full-time. And day in and day out, Alex is putting his body on the line to achieve greatness in climbing. He's extremely confident in his abilities, but he knows what will happen if he makes one false move. His friends and family are worried for him, and rightfully so. He's breaking the boundaries of what's possible, knowing that he could die at any moment. is there a proper place for fear or self-loathing in all of that? Fear shouldn't not exist. There's a clear reason why humans have lived for so long, as fear has helped us avoid the most dangerous things that otherwise would have wiped out our species. But for those seeking the greatest heights that nature can offer, fear is going to be a part of that experience, whether you like it or not. The same goes with feelings of self-loathing and depression. Violently responding to it by trying to altogether cast it off can often make you feel worse in nearly every aspect of your life. As someone who is close to people with mental health struggles and isn't entirely mentally well himself, I understand. That same overexertion is often comparable to climbing mountains. Alex Honnold describes climbing aggressively as generating too much strain on your muscles, getting too pumped, meaning it's easier for you to make costly mistakes. It's about recognizing these feelings of both self-loathing and exhaustion while they're happening, and trying to prevent yourself from being too emotionally pumped, and trying to make your peace with these feelings. And eventually, that is what Madeline does. After a long and arduous gauntlet with the evil part of her, fighting tooth and nail to keep her distance from the other half of her that does not want a single thing to do with her, they talk. Dark Madeline eventually relents, accepting that Madeline doesn't need her at all, but Madeline chooses the opposite, saying, "I need your help now, more than ever," because she does. Dark Madeline's presence would have greatly helped against the dark matter-slaying hotel owner, against the horrors of the Mirror Temple, and helped her find balance in the journey to the summit. And together, they do just that. Madeline and her other half combine to form a greater, stronger Madeline, one that can now double dash. They climb the mountain faster than ever thought before, speeding through the various sections with ease that Madeline and I were struggling to complete just a few hours prior. It takes them all the way to the top of the mountain, and Madeline finally learns to be okay with failure despite making it there. She's at peace for what feels like the first time in ages. But lo and behold, she does make it to the top. Madeline says, "Look at how far we've come." And evil Madeline realizes she won't be able to stick around in the same way. Yet they're still part of each other. But for now, they at least get to enjoy the view. A particular interesting choice for me in Celeste is the game's choice of never showing you the whole mountain outside of selecting each level. My friend even said to me while I was explaining the script for this video that Celeste seemed more like a cave game than a mountain game. You're reliant on your and Madeline's experience climbing it to judge how tall this mountain even is, showing that climbing a mountain is almost just as much about the person climbing it than it is about the mountain itself. It's a deeply intimate journey that will take you through emotional highs and lows and show you more of yourself than you ever thought you could before. I don't know if there's a game out there quite like Celeste that really nails this theme throughout the entirety of its story. There's no end to the plot devices and their deeper meaning behind Madeline's journey, the thematic mirrors, the literal ghosts of the past you must encounter, and the mental journey being nearly as arduous as the physical one for Madeline. As much as she impacts the mountain redirects that same amount of impact back to her. But most of all, the journey is not about overcoming feelings of fear and doubt and self-loathing. It's learning to reconcile with those emotions and use them for good. At the beginning of the journey, Madeline was motivated to climb the mountain out of what seemed like sheer spite and blind determination. In the end, it's about perseverance, self-love, and acceptance. It was never about actually reaching the summit, as Madeline says herself. It was about knowing you could do it at all. In the traditional sense of comparing a mountain to the self, mountains are about personal glory. Celeste breaks that trope and flips it on its head. It's about how the protagonist changes during their journey up the mountain, reconciles with the most deep-seated emotions, and eventually conquers them. And as the environment transforms humankind, so must humankind transform. You never know how much the environment means to you until you lose it forever. In the game Jusant, a French translation for a retreating tide, the land is barren. Ships are scattered across a massive desert, rusting in the harsh sunlight. Dead masses of marine organisms line the sand. The only signs of life the nameless protagonist can see are birds that seemingly avoided whatever catastrophe befell this world. But all of this is dwarfed by the truly colossal mountain that lies before you. To call it a mountain is a disservice. It's a behemoth of pure earth that's seemingly so big that you can't even begin to glimpse the summit. And yet somehow, you and your little blob creature on your shoulder have to climb this structure with nothing but your wits and your grip strength. Like Celeste, Jusant is an incredibly focused game because of its emphasis on tight mechanics. Climbing is notoriously one of the most tedious parts of any game if developers don't align it with the player's goals. Most of the time, climbing is used as a proxy to let other set pieces and level sections load while your character loafs around on the side of a cliff for a few minutes. It's an obligatory part of most AAA action games, and it's often the worst part of these games as well. So to make a game where 95% of the gameplay is just climbing is a tall task. And Jusant excels within these limitations. Mechanically, every button press you make while climbing this mountain makes intuitive sense. Use the triggers on your controller to act as your left and right hand, and you have to be constantly pressing them to have a grip on the mountain. It's very disorienting initially, but once you find a rhythm, you can climb pretty quickly. You also have a rope attached to you, which you can tack pythons on for extra mobility on these cliff faces, allowing you to swing across massive gaps. While the game is forgiving with all these tools, you can still massively overestimate how good you might be at climbing. The cost of your mistakes in Jusant isn't the character's death and then restarting. It's simply having to make up these gigantic stretches of the mountain's face if you fall. One wrong handhold and you go back to climbing the same stretch you just worked so hard to scale. And you need to scale this mountain, as seemingly, society depends on it. The world of Jusant is full of quiet reminders of a society long gone, one with a thriving marine economy and lively hamlets and villages. But without any semblance of water, these settlers departed for good. Most of these people, from what you can gather from the notes and conversation recordings you find, have ascended farther up the mountain to supposed greener pastures. Others have vanished into the desert, leaving as quickly as the water did. You follow in the footsteps of these climate refugees, following their trail to the summit, hoping to reawaken what's been lost. Jusant shares a theme with other breakthrough video game titles about waking up an ancient world. Shadow of the Colossus and Journey are both examples of games that force a comparatively tiny protagonist into an unknown place with massive structures nearly millennia older than them, while conquering colossal, otherworldly forces in the process. Yet in all of the grandeur of this ancient world, it's the ant that must tame the world of the lions. You alone can change the fate of an entire region from falling into catastrophe. You must do it, or else we'll all pay for it. Where Jusant deviates from this formula is that you aren't some hero with a legendary sword or a magic cape. You're just a regular person with some climbing gear and a cute little blob on your shoulder. All you're doing is being a good climber, and nature's doing the rest. And the villains aren't supernatural beasts. You're battling against the same forces of the natural world. Nature doesn't care about you. It's a highly fickle thing. It can foster entire species while simultaneously squashing others out of existence. Modern biology uses this indifference as the basis for natural selection. And in the case of mountains, it's easy to see what animals have been selected to survive these harsh environments. But this brutal indifference has also spurred interesting discussions about morality, how we treat each other, and how we treat our environment. In a quote from his book, The Revolt of the Angels, early 20th century French author Anatole France says, "It is almost impossible systematically to constitute a natural moral law. Nature has no principles. She furnishes us with no reason to believe that human life is to be respected. Nature, in her indifference, makes no distinction between good and evil. Nature remains apathetic to man's concerns. It does not care whether you live or die, but it will act by the principles of life." Likewise, despite the harsh climb, it's unfair to say that Jusant's environment is purely antagonistic. There are some bright patches in this world. Between the bright blues of the frescoes you discover to the burning oranges of the cliff faces and the harsh sunlight, there's plenty of majestic scenes to behold. But with every vista comes a drawback. The sun, seemingly locked into place, will cause the protagonist to lose more energy if it's directly in its light. Howling winds will launch you in random directions towards the end of the game. Yet if used correctly, these aspects can also assist the character in climbing up the mountain. Those same high winds can launch you higher to an out-of-reach outcropping. Stone crab creatures pull you up sheer edges, but only for small stretches. Glowing microorganisms allow you to levitate in some of the cave sections. It's all about leveraging the environment to your use, but in a respectful and caring manner. There's nothing moral about these conditions, just like there is nothing moral about the Jusant itself. I realize I've spent this entire section talking about this environmental catastrophe that's befallen this world without exactly explaining what it is. And there's a reason for that. Obviously the water is gone, but why? Well, in Chapter 3 you start to understand precisely what's going wrong. As you ascend a massive cliff face beneath the burning sun, you notice that your shadow has not moved. The sun has stopped moving in the sky, and therefore the planet you're on has seemingly stopped moving as well. Any semblance of atmosphere or weather is nowhere to be seen, and not a drop of rain has touched this land in weeks. The source of these people's wealth and livelihood has abandoned them, seemingly frozen in time, and it's your job to find it again. And it's seemingly gone up. The ecosystem as a whole is following these climate refugees. In contrast with a typical mountain, where the higher and higher you climb, the less likely you're encountering any life form, the earth pillar of Jusant flips that idea on its head. Beginning the climb, you encounter no life forms other than those who have adapted to this harsh landscape, like crabs and lichen. But by the time you get to the very end, you see plentiful plant life and massive sky whales ascending to the mountain's highest points. Yet you never see any other living person during your entire journey to the summit, because that's who you're undertaking this journey for, the people who lost their livelihoods due to the Jusant. But there's no one. Relationships, families, businesses, even entire towns all were wiped out when the water left. An entire civilization forced to become vertical. Perhaps one of the most impactful narratives that's in this game is the story of Bianca, a lighthouse keeper who ascends the entire mountain just like you do. You get to see her sense of wonder fluctuate as she's forced out of her home, following the promise that these sky whales called ballasts now hold the water that's so precious to humans, while her friends attempt to hunt them down. But by the end, all she wants is a new place to call home, and to not be forced onto the cliff face to survive. We're all victims here. You, the people that used to inhabit this mountain, the animals and plants that used to thrive. But in an instant, you're saved from this melancholy by riding on one of these sky whales, all the way up to the top of the mountain. There are no signs of life as you violently collide with the summit on your frozen ride. And then, one of the most visually striking finales that I have seen in any game, you reawaken the water that's been long lost. Jusant is a game that reveals a deep-seated worry that we all have. What will happen if the home we cherish is lost to a climate catastrophe? What kind of displacement journey will we have to make if that happens to us? How long until we'll see salvation? That journey, that struggle of man against the unpredictable and indifferent forces of nature goes hand in hand with the journey of the protagonist in Jusant. The only thing you see is the mountain. The only purpose is to climb it. The mountain is unmoving, unbroken, unrelenting. It's about how we approach it and nurture our relationship with it that will determine our success. Nature is a fickle thing, but it often can bring out precisely what we need if we're sturdy enough to endure its wrath. I've talked a lot about a mountain's relationship to the central character of these games and their relationship with the greater environment of the mountain around them. But people rarely climb mountains by themselves. Not only can mountains tell us a lot about ourselves and the world, but they also can reveal our most profound relationships, our most trusted friends, and how we deal with conflict. I think the one objectively correct take about God of War 2018 is that it's one of the most transformative narratives in games. The game took a violent, angry, and bitterly spiteful protagonist and molded him into someone that's capable of genuine character development, in part thanks to complex side characters and excellent writing. For anyone who hasn't played the mainline God of War games, I'll try my best to give a 1-minute summary. Kratos is a Spartan soldier that's struggling against a rival barbarian ruler. On the brink of death, Kratos gives his life to the current god of war, Ares. He's changed the Blades of Chaos, which allow him to beat his rival once and for all, but it comes with a catch that he's never allowed to be free of his chains ever again. Ares is a cruel master, tricking Kratos into killing his own wife and daughter, and cursing him for all of eternity to wear their ashes on his skin. He quickly grows tired of being a slave to a god and challenges Ares in single combat, winning and taking his seat as the rightful god of war. He then spends the next 2 games picking fights, changing his fate by force, and slaughtering every single member of the Greek pantheon until there's no one left to oppose him. And then, he leaves. Cory Barlog and crew went with a completely different take on the Ghost of Sparta. God of War 2018 picks up an indeterminate amount of time following the first 3 games to an older, more weathered Kratos. He has a son now, whose name is Atreus, and they both live in the Norse pantheon. He's careful, subdued, but not afraid to show people the god he once was. His wife, and Atreus' mother, is dead, and they must take her ashes to the tallest mountain in the 9 realms. A starting point with Kratos' adventure, bearing similarities to mountains, is the sheer spectacle and violent emotions these games are known for. Between massive creatures that envelop entire realms, to the rage that Kratos fights with, ripping and tearing through enemies like a scythe to a wheat field. But most of all, it's the massive and climactic boss fights that are the hallmark of God of War. While the reboot executes these moments on a bit of a smaller scale, spectacle still plays a huge role in 2018. The fights with dragons, trolls, and Valkyries demonstrate that Sony isn't playing around with the combat in this game. But the crowning fight of 2018 comes in its opening act. There's nothing that I wish more for than to remove my memory of playing this game for the first time and experiencing the beginning boss fight against Boulder again. Despite quite easily handling the first few enemies and mini-boss of the first chapter, Boulder absolutely fucking knocks your socks off, launching you into the air like no enemy has done before. You struggle against him, desperately trying to avoid his attacks while slashing at him with the Leviathan axe. Kratos and Boulder prove such unstoppable forces meeting immovable objects that they create a rift in the earth, seemingly separating the very tectonic plates they're standing on. And just when you think you're beaten, Kratos draws on a rage from his past to even the odds, reminding you that he's still that same warrior from ages long ago. You seemingly triumph in the fight, but you don't see the end of your enemy for long. It's the first step in a long line of impressive moments from this game, trying to match the massive expectations of the journey up the tallest peak in the 9 realms. But while the spectacle has always been a part of God of War, it's not the primary vehicle for the plot like previous games. 2018's focus is a gripping story about grief, acceptance, and family, and is brilliantly represented through Kratos and Atreus' journey. At odds would be an understatement to describe Kratos' relationship with his son. He's a god burdened with abilities and trauma that he's extremely reluctant to pass on to his kin, so he remains sullen and uncommunicative with Atreus. Yet he still possesses the fatherly instincts to protect his son from danger, creating an unfortunate paradox where he wants to care for Atreus, but not enough for him to catch on to his true nature. On the opposite end of this lies Atreus, a boy who doesn't know his father like he wants to, and feels abandoned by his dead mother for leaving him with this barely recognizable father figure. Yet he's also filled with a childlike whimsy so that he wants to connect with everyone. The dwarfs that he meets, the giants, the birds and the animals around him, even his fellow gods despite the chiding of Kratos. But most of all, this whimsy includes strengthening his bond with his own father. This dichotomy isn't really lost on me, with both god and boy representing the worst and best in each other. Kratos is the overprotective safety net, but protects Boy for a good reason. Atreus is the inquisitive, trusting child full of discovery, but is also incredibly naive, causing his dad to protect him. They each change so much throughout the course of the game that their individual journeys are almost worth exploring by themselves. Yet I don't think either of these explanations suffice for the true purpose of the mountain motif in God of War. A mountain is a personal journey? A mountain is the representation of environmental strife and spectacle? We've seen this before. Cory Barlog and company were reaching for something greater. Shifting Earth is a strong symbol that makes itself known in the game. The first boss fight, where Kratos and Boulder force open a chasm just inches away from Kratos' home, the massive weight of the World Serpent leveling the Lake of Nine. Even the ending boss fight, where Freya possesses a giant's body and levels a glacier to stop the fight between Kratos and Boulder again. It's a reaction of the very Earth they're standing on, conveying that even it is not enough to stop the godly powers at play. In a way, the gods and monsters of God of War behave like the very Earth they stand upon. Unmoving, unchanging, but when they clash, it has monstrous consequences for the environment. We have countless myths and legends based on these conflicts. Poseidon was known to create earthquakes whenever he bashed his trident against the ground in furious rages, and Pele of the Hawaiian mythology's anger led to catastrophic volcanic eruptions. Myths like this are based on reality in one form or another. In ancient times, the movements of the Earth were unknown, and modern geography and geology only had a plausible explanation within the last 100 years. All of the land and ocean mass of the Earth sits upon many different portions of the Earth's crust, and those plates sit on top of an ever-shifting, scalding mantle of our planet. That theory is known as plate tectonics. All of these plates are constantly sliding and shifting past each other. As a result, these movements create some of the most impressive, awe-inspiring features of geology. Besides the strike-slip faults that cause devastating earthquakes and divergent plate boundaries where molten earth is being spewed out of ocean basins, a third interaction between these plates is often eye-opening: convergence. Two gigantic landmasses approaching each other, each with an unstoppable force behind them, is godlike in nature. It either forces a weaker, lighter mass to submit against the stronger, heavier one, creating a bitter reminder of the one who was left behind, or, if it's a match between two equals, it can create something awe-inspiring. God of War is a game of dualities. Mother and son, brother and brother, light and dark, high and low, past and future, and most importantly, father and son. Yet equally as important as these relationships is the convergence of these relationships. Kratos and Atreus begin this journey painfully ignorant of each other's feelings and wants, save for pure self-preservation. This ignorance all but assures conflict will happen down the road, where they will converge with each other many, many, many times. They fight about everything, from who to kill to who is right in fighting a war, to what the role of godhood is. And I hate to say it, but Kratos is wrong in a lot of these instances, not purely because of his beliefs, but because of the amount of information that he is holding back about his past from Atreus, and not revealing Atreus' true nature. This disconnect directly manifests itself in the narrative of the game. Kratos leaves Atreus in Alfheim stranded for days on end. Atreus violently goes after enemies that outmatch him nearly 3 times his size. It's an inability to address conflict that permeates both of their minds. These two hot-headed gods think they can just power through everything, and they will reach the peak. It causes them to not even get to the right mountain in the first place, but it reaches a breaking point. Kratos' steadfast belief in the folly of gods has now nearly cost his son's life, and to fix it, he must confront his own godly past and help disconnect it from his previous actions as the god of war in Greece. This specific section and speech from the Ghost of Athena is especially poignant, so I'm just going to let this section play out in full.
There's nowhere you can hide, Spartan. Put as much distance between you and the truth as you want. It changes nothing. Pretend to be everything you are not. Teacher, husband, father. But there is one unavoidable truth you will never escape. You cannot change. You will always be a monster.
I know. But I am your monster no longer.
This is not to say that Kratos was entirely wrong. When Atreus learns of his godhood, he goes maniacal, basically spitting on people of less than his station. But Kratos learns to be the person that can filter out Atreus' negativities and can teach him how to be a better god. They need to be on a level playing field as each other, and ultimately, it's how these conflicts can be resolved. But their mountain, their journey, isn't finished, isn't summited, until Kratos gives up something he never intended to give up, which is the full story of his past. He's been hiding it for so long that it happens at the very end of the game, but it's the only way that they're able to see each other as equals, and the only way for them to summit their goal. So many times along the journey, they've seen failures in addressing these conflicts. Magni and Modi, the light and dark elves, and Freya and Boulder. These are all Continental forces just barreling towards each other, ignorant to each other's emotions and needs. But by being honest with each other, Kratos and Atreus are able to create the strong mountain of their relationship and complete their journey. When they get to the top of the mountain, Kratos and Atreus find out that their entire journey was laid out before them, foretold by the prophecies of the giants. Yet what wasn't foretold by those images was the emotional circumstances that would get them there. Kratos and Atreus, now finally at the peak of the tallest mountain in all of the 9 realms, share a true bond between father and son. 2 gigantic plates of earth on a collision course with destiny. They've overcome the weight of godhood, the chains of their past, and have summited the most difficult mountain of them all, just as Faye would have wanted. Congrats. You made it to the outro. Thanks so much for watching this video. This one was a bit longer. Thank you so much for all the support that you've been giving me over the past year. My goal this year, hopefully, is to make at least 6 of these, maybe more. Who's to say? It would be really a big help if you just gave this video a quick like, maybe subscribe to the channel. That would be sick. Appreciate it. And once again, thank you so much for watching. Yeah. Also, feel free to follow me on Twitter and Twitch there. I'm going to be streaming a lot more this year also. So Twitch is over there. Twitter's over there. Thank you very much. And yeah, jackalope.